r/ask Reddit. What were the facts you learned in school that are no longer true? You're not gonna have a calculator everywhere you go. In India we were taught math without calculators, and so even the dumbest of nuts could do some sort of mental math. Then we all went to university, where we could use the technology of calculators. By the next semester I was double checking if 4 plus 2 equals 6. There are certain things that are tough to quickly estimate by hand. For example, any irrational numbers, pi, e, etc., any exponents, roots, trig functions, etc. Overall, math simply isn't about turning yourself into a human calculator. It's about being a human problem solver. The food pyramid. It's not even three-dimensional. It's a food triangle. It's actually a reverse funnel. I didn't learn this in school, but I heard it often repeated on things like the Discovery Channel and Animal Planet when I was a kid. I always heard that the Komodo dragon, the largest living lizard on Earth, was such a successful predator because its mouth was so filthy and septic that the microbes in the saliva would cause fatal infections on its prey. The dragon would track the wounded animal until it eventually collapsed and would eat it. This, as it turns out, is not true, or at the very least not the whole story. It takes days for microbial infections to begin to show symptoms in an animal as large as, say, a water buffalo. But animals were collapsing hours after being bitten, not days. Microbial infections from their saliva couldn't explain how rapidly these large mammals were being killed. This lie was repeated throughout my childhood, and I even heard it repeated at the San Diego Zoo as recently as last year. As it turns out, Komodo dragons are able to hunt so successfully because their saliva contains venom that they produce from their venom glands. I thought that until this very moment. I never felt so betrayed as when I learned it. Apparently they didn't even know about the venom glands until 2009, with some evidence of venomous proteins only going back to 2005. Zoologists were pretty surprised to learn this too. For decades, conventional wisdom was that were only two species of venomous lizards, the Gila monster and beaded lizard. Then they started looking for venom proteins in saliva. Turns out instead of two venomous lizards, it's actually more like 1,300. Also, almost all snakes have venom. The Great Wall of China is the only man-made structure visible from space. I never understood why people said this. It doesn't make any sense. Because the wall is not wide, just long. Right, like if you could see the wall. You'll definitely be able to see highways and stuff. The top of the wall is like 15 feet closer to space though. Oh yeah, I forgot to factor that into my calculations. The tongue has different taste zones. Oh, I remember that. I tried that myself many times. I was never able to replicate the experiment. Could not imagine back then that there was any chance that information written in a book could be wrong. So I concluded that my tongue is broken or I don't know how to experiment. Pluto was a planet when I was at school. Of course, Jerry. It's a cold celestial dwarf. When I was a kid we were taught that penguins' feet didn't freeze because of their circulation. It turns out they have antifreeze proteins in their blood that bind to ice crystals and stop them from growing, so their blood stays liquid well below 0 degrees. Source: worked at a university research center with a guy that did his PhD in antifreeze proteins. Edit: proteins not enzymes. Sorry, biochemistry. You have to learn in cursive writing. Higher schooling will not accept anything that isn't cursive. Yes, I remember teachers racing students in handwriting. Teachers would write the alphabet as cursive and students would do it in print. This was the only argument they used as to why cursive was better. Then high school came and no one wrote in cursive and everything we handed in had to be typed. Jokes on them. I combine cursive and print when I write. Sometimes even I can't read what I wrote. There is a country called Czechoslovakia. That two blue-eyed parents can't have a brown-eyed child. Apparently not only is this pure bullshit, the genetics of eye color is more complex than that. It led to a lot of kids being rejected by their real fathers before DNA testing became available. My son was taught that you had to have the same blood type as one of your parents. He told his teacher that his dad is O+, I'm A+, and yet he's O. And the teacher gave him a funny look and told him that maybe we should have a talk. He came home in a panic and asked if he was the result of an affair. I was so pissed. Of course I had to be sarcastic about it. You figured it out. Dad cheated on me and got pregnant, which is the only way this could happen because you look just freaking like him. He calmed down, did a bit of research, then apologized. I was taught in grade school that we had to know the metric system because the United States was going to adopt it like any day now. For sure, that was about 30 years ago. The US is moving towards the metric system, inch by inch. I mean, the US government passed the Metric Conversion Act in 1975 that officially made the metric system the preferred way to measure things. The change just hasn't been happening in everyday life. Look, if we adopted the metric system, when the temp hit 100 degrees, we would all die. Our lakes will boil. Do you want that? Christopher Columbus was the first dude to discover America and tried to bargain with the Indians but couldn't work it out because of cultural differences. In grade school during the 70s, we were also taught that he sailed west to prove the world was round. We were taught that in the 2000s as well. What a load of crap. I have a graduate level college textbook for teachers that also states the same thing. It was treated as fact. The book was published in 2015. You're born with a set number of brain cells and that number can only diminish throughout your life. Anti-alcohol. I remember version of that. I don't know how much common is it, but if the earth were 1 centimeter closer to the sun, we would be burned. 1 centimeter further from the sun we would be frozen thing. No, we wouldn't. The distance is changing all the time. During a year. No one better jump than S. Forget jumping. If you're a couple of inches shorter or taller than your friend, at least one of you is ducked. In psychology class we learned about the bystander effect and the Kitty Genovese story where apparently she was raped and killed. She cried for help but her neighbors in the building apparently assumed someone else was going to help her. Turns out the story was embellished by a reporter so that it sounded like no one did help her but her neighbors actually helped and she died on the way to the hospital. The bystander effect is still a thing, right? Only the example doesn't hold up. Actually, the story was embellished by the police because several neighbors said they did call the police and no one responded. So the police defended themselves with an aggressive no one called the police media push, which was picked up in a big way by the New York Times. But the good news is that the aggressive media coverage of this story and resulting public outrage helped lead to the establishment of the nationwide 911 emergency phone system. Pluto is the 9th and last planet in the solar system. The atom is indivisible. I will be successful if I get an A in every class. They first split the atom in 1917. Apparently, my school only heard about it in 2004. My early teachers always said that the Pilgrims and the Indians got along and had a happy Thanksgiving. All was joyous. But when I got to 4th grade my teacher basically said everything you know about Thanksgiving is a lie and sadly we learned the truth. At least you were taught that in grade 4. My grade 12 Canadian history class still taught that when the settlers came everything was joyous, and the fur trade was a turn of the century operation. Took an Aboriginal studies class in university and I was in shock. One of my favorite high school teachers either couldn't at the time or failed to even address the real reason behind reserves. That adults are smart and have everything figured out. Adults are just children with experience. You only lose 2 teaspoons of blood during a period. Bullshit. Yes, I was taught this in nursing school. Boy was I surprised when I started using a menstrual cup. One of the reasons I started using a menstrual cup was because my doctor wouldn't believe me when I said I bled so much. I wanted to be able to quantify it. It turns out I was losing anywhere from 200 milliliters to 300 milliliters of blood per period. That is only counting cups I completely fill, not the partially filled ones or the overflow amount I'll lose directly into the toilet or leaked out onto the pad. You're only allowed to use one source from the internet in your paper. The rest needs to come from books. And God forbid someone else beat you to that book you needed. You might not see it for 2 weeks. I before E, except after C. But I have weird beige neighbors. The full phrase is I before E, except after C, or when sounded like I as in neighbor and way. But yeah, weird is weird. Forfeit the rule. In Norway we learned that the US had 52 states Kosovo Bukrimtangera. There are 52 states when you include the Jukas. In 3rd grade I was taught that Antarctica was the second largest continent, because it looked that way on a map. I honestly don't know if my teacher actually believed that or if she was just ducking with us. Drink 8 glasses of water a day. Yeah, I remember this. Ever since I started drinking 8 glasses of whiskey instead, everything has been a lot better. Really. When I was in kindergarten we sat in a circle and one at a time we'd enter the circle and act like our favorite animal and the others had to guess what we were. My favorite animal was a cheetah, so I crawled swiftly across the floor. No one could guess it. So after a few minutes and repeated all 4 sprints, my teacher, who wasn't very nice to me, said, "I noticed you're moving very fast. A leopard?" To which I replied, "No, a cheetah is the fastest." She insisted she was right and I was wrong and never corrected herself. 2 years later I had her as a teacher again, because we had a very large 2nd grade class, and after some unrelated trouble my parents confronted her with this story at a parent-teacher conference. She denied it and insisted we agree on that. This taught me everything I'd ever need to know about facts and authority figures. My 8th grade biology teacher told us that only identical twins were possible and that there was no scientific possibility for identical triplets, twins, etc. Imagine my surprise many years later when I discovered this was a blatant lie. I'm still confused as to how she could have possibly believed that, but then I remember that was before the internet. Polar bears stayed warm because their fur was fiber optic and absorbed heat from the sun. So if enough polar bears stood next to each other I'd finally have fast fiber internet. I'm still in school and so many things have already changed. Pluto used to be a planet. The food pyramid used to be valid. And you can't start a sentence with the word but. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.